Introduced in the late 2250s, the Mayflower class was envisioned as a small, low-cost frigate class built to civilian standards for service in the Federation's core and middle territories. Areas which seldom required the full capabilities of a more naval-orientated frigate, such as the contemporary Lochnar class, but which did still have need for a fairly capable Federation-flagged vessel for the purposes of law enforcement, liaison between member states of the UFP, and general support missions. The resultant vessel was small, short-ranged, lightly armed, but very reliable. Measuring in at 109 meters wide, 190 meters long, and 38 meters tall, the Mayflower class embarked a crew of 120 personnel as standard. Armed with 4 twin phaser banks, the basic configuration of the ship did not mount any torpedo tubes, though the ship was designed with the ability to have an integrated launcher and magazine pod added to the ship via a roll bar, a first in Starfleet. This roll bar being also able to accept other modules to further increase the utility of the ship. The Mayflower class had a cruising speed of warp factor 5, well below the fleet standard of warp 6, and a maximum speed of warp factor 7.1. Slow for the contemporary classes in Starfleet service, but perfectly acceptable for what duties the ship was expected to perform. Following the 4 Years' War, Starfleet had begun an extensive building program aimed at expanding the size and capabilities of the fleet with an entirely new generation of ship classes. During the 2250s, new classes of cruiser, frigate, destroyer, scout, and support ship would enter service in rapid succession and see significant, for the time, numbers entering service. This plan for the building up of the fleet quickly ran into several issues which required a re-evaluation. First was the increase in the missions expected of Starfleet and the depth of area in which the fleet was expected to operate. And secondly was the significant uptick in tensions between the Federation and several of its neighbors. Both of these problems resulting in a significant increase in the number of ships required from that originally envisioned. To meet these challenges, Starfleet would look into building several new classes of light ships built to civilian standards to keep costs down and maintenance simple. Given their intended roles, these new ships would be fairly slow compared to line ships, and would be lightly armed and protected, too lightly armed and protected for use with the fleet. But seeing as this was not the main role of the ships, this was seen as not an issue. What capabilities they were intended to have would be more than sufficient for the convoy escort, law enforcement, colonial support, border patrol, light diplomacy, and stellar survey missions which they were needed for. Project teams would be assembled to begin design of these new ships in 2257, with 2 projects, one for a frigate built to civilian standards intended to free up the more capable Lochnar class for duties along the border, and another team for a so-called corvette, a light, small, fast, but lightly armed ship meant for deployments mostly within more settled systems or in a handful of closer-together systems. Work proceeded quickly, with prototypes being ordered at the end of 2258. USS Mayflower would commission with the fleet in 2260, being joined in rapid succession by a large number of sister ships. The class proved generally unpopular with their crews, who found the ships to be cramped, with Spartan furnishings for the crew and decidedly dated equipment. Though longtime crews would come to love their ships, if only due to acceptance of their fate and a professional sense of pride. Despite the misgivings of many of their crews, the Mayflower would prove to be a nearly ideal design for the missions which it was assigned, the ships finding themselves constantly on assignment throughout their early years of deployment. Perhaps the greatest testament to the success of the Mayflowers during their early years would be the upswing in the popularity of Starfleet among the populations of many of these smaller Federation colonies spread throughout the UFP. Used to being visited only rarely, if ever unless they were forced to call for help, the arrival of the Mayflowers into service permitted Starfleet to begin a much more regular program of visitation to these smaller colonies. This increased presence and perceived sense of interest from Starfleet would reassure many of these worlds after the uncertainty of the 4 Years' War that Starfleet was close to hand and, importantly, willing to help. Despite the large numbers which entered service, in total nearly 80 Mayflowers being built, the class would only be produced for a short time, with the final member of the class, the USS Cleo, being launched in 2266. The Mayflower would continue in this quiet but effective and appreciated service until they were listed for disposal under the terms of the first Khitomer Accords, the class being replaced in their role by newer ships as needed, though Mayflowers would continue to find use by Starfleet and in the civilian sector for decades to come, with several hulls being used as technological test beds, training ships, transports, and support craft in Starfleet service, while many more would be bought by civilian operators and converted to their use, seeing service up until the present day. Though never intended to operate in the spotlight, the service that the Mayflower gave during its half-century career cannot be overlooked or looked past. While the good that the ships did to the reputation of Starfleet and the sense of security felt by average Federation citizens is too great to calculate. To put it simply, these ships were good enough for what they needed to do, and that was all they were needed to be. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to give it a like. This is a less well-known ship. I believe it's only ever appeared in the background shot of Star Trek 2009 that shows Starfleet rushing to help Vulcan in that scene where J.J. Abrams shows that he has no concept of distance and no patience for travel times, where they go multiple light years in a few minutes, just long enough to get a dramatic scene done. You see the ship way in the background. And I think it's destroyed later on in that sequence. But yeah, I mean, it's not terribly popular, and I like the neat little design, so I gave it a little bit of a backstory here. Let me know what you think of my version of the ship's history in the Prime timeline, or if you think it's garbage and it's a garbage ship from a garbage movie. I mean, I don't think 2009 is great. I mean, you're free to... Well, I mean, it wasn't a great movie. But, you know, J.J. Abrams and all that. I have other videos. Feel free to subscribe to the channel. I aim to make a video every week. Usually that happens. I have some big plans for this coming year. Also, you can join the channel's Patreon. There's a link in the description below that links to, weirdly enough, Patreon. And that gives you a couple of perks. You can vote on once a month what video is going to come out. That's going to be starting this year. You get behind the scenes stuff, and you also get these videos about a day early. Basically, as I upload them to YouTube about 12, 15, 16 hours before the videos go live, I post them on Patreon as well. So you get them before everybody else, which is nice, I hope. But yeah, I mean, I've probably rambled on more than long enough. Oh, also, I hope the fan noise is a little bit better in this video. It was kind of bad in the last one and I didn't catch it. But yeah, hopefully it's improved. But either way, whether you like the ship, like the video, comment about your love/hate of J.J. Abrams' body of work, have a nice day, I guess.